Hello everybody, welcome back to Steph's Movies and Music. I am, of course, your host, Steph. Today, well, really tonight, we are here to talk about Paul Simon and his most recent concert here in St. Louis, Missouri. We're going to talk about the set list, we're going to talk about, of course, how he sounded, all the typical stuff. So, yeah, where to begin? I guess let's just talk about how he sounded first of all. So Paul Simon's 84 years old, I think. Somewhere around there, 83, 84. Quite a lot of time has gone by since his prime. Does he sound the same? No, he doesn't. Do I expect him to? No, absolutely not. Now, I will say this. Because of all that time that has gone by, his voice does sound a lot more, it's kind of hard to say, kind of worn, I guess, would be the best way to put it. A little thin. You could tell he's old. You know what I mean? There's certain times he'll hit a note and it'll be like kind of a higher note, and you could hear that classic Paul Simon voice from all those years ago. So he's still in there. You know, he's still got it to an extent. Is he the exact same? No, he's not. He's aged relatively well. It didn't look like he was super overweight or anything. So it seems like he's been trying to stay healthy at least, which is always good. That also helps with how you sound as well. Obviously, I'm not a trainer. I'm a bigger guy, 250 pounds. I wouldn't judge anybody for being fat, anyways. I have no room to talk whatsoever. And I just wanted to point that out and spend some time talking about that because the last concert review I did about Daryl Hall, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that already, I'll put that in the link in the description below. Then I had a whole bunch of people texting me like, he's 78, what do you expect? Speaking of the Daryl Hall video, let me just pause and say, I actually sat directly in front of a couple behind me, at least I think they were married. I believe their names were Jonathan and Carolina. It was one of the two. I asked for her name a couple times and I forgot it both times. I think it was Carolina. And they were both very nice. Carolina recognized me. Apparently she watched the Daryl Hall video and she was like, oh my god, it's you. And that was really cool to be recognized from a video. It was a really, really weird feeling because that's never happened before to my knowledge. That video apparently went kind of viral. I mean, I don't know what happened, but thanks guys, I really appreciate that. And if you're watching here now, thank you very much. Getting back to Paul Simon though, he sounded good for his age, we'll say that. And once again, there were little snippets here and there that you could tell that he still had it. He still had some of those vocal chops that he had back in the day. Does he sound outstanding? No. Does he sound pretty good for an 84-year-old? Yes, absolutely he does. If he is 84. I didn't look it up. I should have looked it up before this. Alright, I looked it up. He's 83. My bad. Sorry. 83. He sounded really good for an 83-year-old. Moving on to the set list, because that's really the only major thing I really have to talk about. There's a couple other pointers that I'll get to after the set list portion. He played a lot of his solo hits, and he played a few Simon and Garfunkel songs. There are a couple songs that really would have been... I'm not complaining, first of all, but there are a couple of songs that I was really hoping to hear that I didn't hear. Now, here's the thing about footage. I typically try to capture footage. For the most part, I'm going to have to... rely on other people's clips that are already on the internet. Let's go through what he did play, and then we'll talk about what he didn't play. So just going through some highlights here, he played Graceland. He also played Slip Sliding Away, which went to number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. And then he played a Simon and Garfunkel song called Homeward Bound, which is an excellent song. I actually got footage of that one, so here's that. He also played another song from, I believe, the Graceland album, and the song's called Under African Skies, and it was a really cool song, and it wasn't a hit by any means. I believe it was just, I believe it was a single, but it didn't chart on the Hot 100. It might have been on a different chart, though. I'm sure it was. And for that, he had his wife, Edie Brickell, come out, who had also came out a couple of times before then as well, but she was really front stage with him this time, and it was like a duet, which was really, really, really cool. And I also managed to get some footage of that, so here you go.
and walk these days under African stars.
And by the way, just so you guys know, this was one of the pointers I wanted to get to. Edie Brickell still has her vocal chops. Now, am I Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians fan? Not really. They have the one song, What I Am, which I believe went to number 5. That's the only song I really know by them. But she's definitely talented, and she pretty much sounds the same as she did in the 80s, which is really cool. He also played Mother and Child Reunion, which was really cool. I believe that went to number 4. That's one of his biggest solo hits for sure. And then directly after that, he played Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. I believe that's what it's called. It's kind of a long title, but which is another really cool one, and the audience really got into that one. I wish I could have recorded it. If anything, just to capture the audience's reaction. They were really into that one. Then after that, they took an encore break, and then they played 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which of course is a classic Paul Simon song. I believe that went all the way to number 1 on the Hot 100.
Just about the back, just say there no plans, you don't need to call, just listen to me.
And then right after that, he played 2 Simon and Garfunkel songs back to back. The Boxer.
All lies are just, still a man hears what he wants to hear, disregards the rest.
And of course, the almighty The Sound of Silence.
I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping.
And that was it. That was the Paul Simon Show. As you can see, these clips, his voice is a little worn, like I mentioned. Once again, he's 83. He sounded great for what it is. Now, of course, he did leave out a lot of his other big hits. Honestly, I really wish I would have heard You Can Call Me Al. And then he also didn't play Mrs. Robinson from Simon & Garfunkel, which is my favorite Simon & Garfunkel song. That said, I do think it's important to note, to mention that the whole tour is called A Quiet Celebration. So each of these songs are kind of not a dumbed down version, but just slightly more, I guess, just kind of an acoustic version of their actual studio counterparts. And I think that's a good way to do it, especially since he is getting older. Well, not getting older, he is older, you know. That's probably a good thing to do, and I think some other artists, if they're going to keep going out there, maybe they should start doing that too. That's probably why he didn't do You Can Call Me Al. It's not really a quiet song by any means. I don't know, maybe he just didn't want to do it. That's probably what it is. The same with Mrs. Robinson. That's not a loud song either. He could have easily done that, but he didn't, which is a bummer because, once again, that's my favorite song, and it is a big Simon & Garfunkel hit. It's obvious that his focus isn't just the hits, and that's fine. I'm not over here being like, all we want to hear is the hits. I am more of a casual fan of Paul Simon's and Simon & Garfunkel's. I should probably mention that. Playing album tracks and other songs that weren't hits is totally fine by me. It was definitely a vibe, you know what I mean? It was a cool show. Would I recommend seeing Paul Simon if you could get them for a decent price? Yes, I do. That's the one caveat I have. This concert was expensive as hell. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you how much I paid. $258. I believe that was the total amount that I paid for my one ticket. Now, as you can see from the Homeward Bound and the Under African Skies clips that I showed you, I had a pretty decent spot. I kind of had to shoot like between like the shoulders of a couple people just because I wasn't trying to get caught. And then after that I stopped because like the guy was like making his rounds, and I was just like, I don't want to get in trouble. I felt bad doing the 2 clips already. So yeah, I had a pretty decent seat. I was in row P. Yeah, the row P. And like seat 15. Once again, $258. I think the balcony seats were like $85 before fees. They probably would have came out to about $100 after fees. So this is a pricey show. He's doing smaller venues, it seems like. Also, I did buy a t-shirt at the concert. Paul Simon, A Quiet Celebration. It's got all the tour dates here on the back. It's kind of cool how they all kind of section them out into the months. So that's pretty cool. I guess kind of a standard shirt, but I thought it was really nice. And yeah, it was $40. I'm surprised it wasn't more. I know $40 for a t-shirt is still kind of ridiculous, but I am really surprised it wasn't more than that. Anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know this was a great show. Once again, do I recommend seeing Paul Simon? Yes, if you could get him for a decent price, go right ahead. I imagine there's lots of older folks out there that are willing to pay whatever to see Paul Simon. I don't know if he's going to go out again. This isn't a farewell tour. It is a quiet celebration. So take that for what it is. At least he's not, trying to throw out there farewell and then bait and switch everybody. Although I don't know if he actually already went on a farewell tour. I heard somebody say that he already did. I'm not sure if that's true. Maybe you guys could let me know in the comments. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I needed to mention. Hey, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. This channel has blown up significantly since the last concert review. I just want to thank all of you newcomers and all the old timers as well for watching my video. Don't forget to comment and like, and of course subscribe. Now more than ever, because now I'm monetized, it really does make a difference. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. This is Steph signing off. I'll see you guys later. Let's roll the credits. Oh, you're still here. Well, I guess if you watched this far, then you're obviously interested in what I have to say. I guess the last thing that I can say is, I know there's a lot of die-hard Paul Simon fans out there. I'm not ratting on the guy. I'm not, trying to knock him in any way, shape, or form here. Last time on the Daryl Hall video, I got a lot of flack for that I was just being super brutal. And I do, in hindsight, feel like I was a little too brutal on Daryl Hall. But a lot of it was still very deserved. And a lot of what I said about Paul Simon in this video was also very well deserved. But he didn't sound awful by any means, not even in the slightest, He just sounded kind of old, is really the only kind of bad thing I said. So please, be gentle. I'm not, I'm really not trying to give the guy a hard time at all. I was overall really happy with how the show went. Although I know this is kind of nitpicking, and this is more me talking about the venue that the concert was at, not the concert itself. But it is a shame that I wasn't really able to record more than what I did. I understand some people find it distracting. I never turn my flash on when I'm at concerts. I always turn it off. I hardly ever use my flash to begin with. And I'm not like standing up, and unless everybody else is standing up, I'm not standing up trying to get like a good angle or anything like that. I try to be as discreet as I can be. Honestly, I try not to be in anybody's way. I know not everybody is like that, and it only takes a couple people to ruin it for everybody. So once again, I understand that. But honestly, at this particular venue, the Stiefel Theater, and it's not the workers' fault themselves. They're doing their job. They're doing what they have to do. They're doing protocol, you know what I mean? And so when they're running around telling everybody to turn their phones off and delete that picture they just took, which again is ridiculous, it's more distracting than the phones themselves, I feel like. Another thing that did happen, and once again, this was just at the venue, a lady a few rows behind me, she had to have been probably 30 or something like that. At one point, I think it was during 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, She stood up. Everybody else was sat down. She stood up and, like, absolutely just would not sit back down. She started dancing around. She was, there were people behind her yelling at her to sit down. The guards were yelling at her to sit down. And eventually she did sit down once the song was over. Once again, it was like 2 minutes of that, and then she finally sat down after being so disruptive and so disrespectful to everybody behind her, and honestly in front of her too, because we might not have to look at her, but we still have to hear what's going on behind us. Now, as much of a disruption that was, the workers still were trying to, like, get her to, like, they were trying to kick her out basically. And it would have been one thing if they took care of that in a more quieter way, but honestly, they were making just as much noise well after she was already sat down. Once again, she should not have stood up in the first place, but well after she was already sat down, a couple minutes go by and they get, like, there's a worker that literally goes into the lane. So she's, like, blocking people already, trying to get this woman out. And it's like she's already sat down. There are literally people yelling at the worker just to leave her alone because they just want to salvage the rest of the show. They don't want any more disruptions, and I agree with that. They should have just live and let live, basically. She shouldn't have done it in the first place. That's absolutely true. She was being a complete and total bitch for it. But they should have just live and let be at this point. And once again, they're real sticklers with the cameras. So all in all, I'm not complaining about... I know what they're just doing their job, so I'm not trying to give the workers really a hard time, especially about the camera thing. Apparently, that's just a big rule that they have at the venue. That's just what the rule is. So it's not really exactly the workers' fault. They just have to follow that procedure. It's whoever's higher up on the food chain there. That's on them. That's their rule, I guess they set. It's not the workers' fault. It's kind of the workers' fault for, like, having to, like, still make such a big deal out of kicking the lady out. They should have just let her be. If she did it again, then maybe kind of try to remove her, but she was sat down and she was being quiet. Once again, she shouldn't have done it in the first place, but I don't know. I'm putting this at the end of the video because I know nobody's really going to care. Nobody's going to watch this far anyway. But if you stuck around this far, then you're probably interested in hearing what I have to say. So anyway, yep. I think that's everything that I need to say. I'm done venting about lousy people at the venue, and I'm done venting about workers that are low-key just trying to do their job, but it's still kind of annoying. I'm all done with that. Thanks again to Jonathan and his wife, Carolina. Sorry, I can't quite remember how to pronounce your name. You're both really nice, and thanks for watching the other video, and thank you all for watching this video. Once again, like, comment, subscribe. It'll help me out a lot, but you don't have to do any of that stuff. More than anything, I'm just happy that you're here watching this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, for real this time, Steph signing off. Let me get out of here.